Folks, welcome to an episode of The Wormhole. We've had quite a bit of gap, but it's really an exciting guest I have for us today. And we are really, really happy to welcome through the Wormhole, Dr. Ryan Mohammed. Good morning, Ryan.
Morning, pleased to be here.
Okay, wonderful having you. So who is Dr. Ryan Mohammed, right? So let's get an introduction to him, and it's going to be really exciting to get into his mind and learn all about his journey. So Ryan graduated from the University of the West Indies after completion of a PhD in aquatic biology in 2019. He has co-authored articles in several international high-impact journals such as Nature and locally in the Living World Journal. He has also written various aquaculture training manuals for the Caribbean and book chapters on biodiversity. Ryan has served as an acting curator of the UWI Zoology Museum, and in that portfolio, he played a really important role of repatriating Trinidad's Ice Age asphaltic fossils. That's a mouthful, and it's something definitely we're going to find out more about. Within the last decade alone, he has served as a consultant to UNESCO and other international bodies on projects focused on biodiversity, aquaculture, and blue-green economy. Absolute pleasure to have you with us on the Wormhole. And we're very happy that we're connecting right here in Trinidad, of course, in different locations through the Wormhole. Let me start with a little bit in your childhood and see how you made this journey to where you are today. So did you have like defining moments in your life that brought you to where you are in your career today?
Yeah, I would say it started very early on. My grandparents, both on my mom's side and my dad's side, they were cane farmers, and during this would be even before I started primary school, I would go into the cane fields with them, and while they were doing what they had to do in the cane fields, I would be in the drainage ditches between cane fields, and that's where I first started to observe fish and have a passion for aquatic fauna. I saw my first freshwater turtle in a ditch there. I remember catching crabs in the cane field ditches, carrying fish to school to show people. Yeah, so yeah, it started that early.
Okay, so it's a childhood passion, and it speaks to us the importance of the things that you get exposed to in your childhood, right?
Mhm.
So you are a child of the nature. You've always been. So along the way in your journey, I mean, you did mention your grandparents quite a bit. Did you have like people who inspired you to continue all the way to a PhD and heroes along the way?
Yeah, I had several. So very early on in primary school and leading into secondary school, I knew I wanted to do science. And in secondary school, I had an integrated science teacher in Forms 1 to Form 2 called David Maraj. But he was the first one I would say started to nurture my love for science. But definitely, as I was in A levels, I started to learn more and more about what the options were for biologists. And I remember on my earlier years, on a family vacation, I went to the Living Seas exhibit in Epcot Center, where the first time I seen it growing hydroponics plants in without soil. And I was thinking, that's a waste. They should put fish in there. And I didn't know that would have be a thing in the future. And eventually, when I did come to UWI, it was kind of funny because my intention was to see the great Julian Kenny, only to realize he retired the year before that. So I didn't actually meet him then. I met him years afterwards. But I would say those were some of the more instrumental, at least up until my university years. During my university years, I would definitely say Prof. John Agard was instrumental. Um, uh, my PhD supervisors from the UK, Prof. Cockburn Osterhout and Joe Cable from Cardiff University, they were also very, very, very instrumental in guiding me along the way.
So when I introduced you, I mentioned that you work with blue-green economy. What is that? What does that mean?
So the blue-green economy, firstly, the United Nations, they proposed categorizing different forms of economies based on different colors. So the brown economy is industry, and this is more of typical types of industry structures. But the blue-green economy, it's a amalgamation of both the blue economy and the green economy. Blue economy being anything related with water, and green economy, anything related with some sort of sustainability and green production, forestry, crop production, etc. And Trinidad being an island, the Caribbean islands, island archipelago, there's a very close interaction between what happens on land and what happens to sea. So we can't look at things in silos. So we have to look at the blue-green economy, that ridge to reef approach because what happens on land definitely affects the sea.
Okay, that's really fascinating. And I mean, being an island and other even smaller islands in the Caribbean region, we can see really the importance of the blue-green, and it's all about the environment. And that just leads me to our next question, talking about the environment holistically. Do you think that we in Trinidad and Tobago are doing enough to protect the environment? And what would you suggest?
I would say historically, no. Okay. Historically, Trinidad and Tobago, I should say. We are a country that we have a lot of legislation, a lot of rules, but our downfall has always been implementation. And the implementation, there are various things we blame for the implementation. Not enough resources, not enough legal structures to prosecute. But the big major issue is that we need to care. Trinidad and Tobago as a nation, we need to start to pay attention to our environment and not break the rules. So it starts with the general citizens. And sometimes the general citizen is as easy as the people that, they stop at a traffic light and they toss the wrappers and the containers out the window, but also at the corporate level, when we make decisions to promote deforestation, to promote poor use and poor disposal of waste, etc. So it's both extremes. We have to look at it both from the corporate level, high up on the ladder, as well as the grassroots level, people in the general community.
So do you feel that there's hope for us? Or, I mean, as you say, when you look historically, it has not been an issue that we have really paid enough attention to. I mean, are you seeing progress?
I am seeing hope. I won't say I'm seeing progress as yet, because in the past, the go-to with regards is, okay, let's say something like plastic waste. The go-to with plastic was recycling, and we started to get more and more people involved in recycling. But the truth is, recycling is actually one of the last avenues of waste management. We should actually reduce how much waste we produce first, and whatever we can't reduce, we try to reuse, and whatever we can't reuse, then we recycle, because there's an energy cost to recycling. We see it every time there's a flood. The first floods, the Caroni River has a coating of plastic. If you look at Port of Spain, why is it at every flood we see a plastic bottle blockage? And means in the interval between floods, we still have plastic bottles going into the system. So we need to start to adopt new practices to make that change.
I think this is a very, very important message that you are relaying to our audience. And I think sometimes we just take it for granted. And, being a small island, I read somewhere that I think Trinidad has some of the highest garbage per capita. And that was like shocking to me, but exactly as you say, after heavy rains and flooding, all of us have witnessed the collection of the bottles. So folks, there's a very important message here for us that all of us need to do our part in trying to reduce. And I like the message you gave, because you really always hear recycle, right? But we need to actually reduce how much plastics that we are using, right? So I can see that your portfolio and all that you do is really big. One of the things that you've done, and I briefly mentioned it in the introduction, that truly fascinates me is that when you were acting curator of the UV Zoology Museum, you were engaged in something I think absolutely amazing, and I don't know how many people know about it. So with that, I'll just jump in. You know what I'm talking about, fossils, people. So from blue-green economy to how does Dr. Ryan move to fossils? Tell us about that project.
Okay, so that project started a while back, 2019. And it all started when at UWI we hosted the Latin American conference on biodiversity uh, at UWI. And there I met two young ladies from the La Brea Tapit Museum. And they were presenting, they were attending the conference. One of them, Dr. Alexis Macaro, she did her conservation biology work in the Caribbean, and she was presenting. But now she was based at the museum in LA, and she met with Prof. Ram Subag and was telling him about asphaltic flies, and he already had a passion in looking at different asphaltic seeps. So he engaged me, and we all met, and we went on a field trip, and then the discussion about these fossils came about, and she said, oh yes, they have fossils from Trinidad in LA. And I said, wait, we have fossils? And that was the beginning of something bigger, where we started the repatriation process. There has been four groups of fossils that have been repatriated to Trinidad thus far. All of them have been accessioned at the UWI Zoology Museum, which means all of them have been officially documented and received by the UWI Zoology Museum. Some of the fossils now reside with the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, and but it's all one big database, because we want to ensure future scientists, future researchers have access to one database where they could find information about the fossils. So now, but a lot of the fossils haven't been identified yet, or at least we know they might be of Ice Age fauna, but some of them we don't know exactly what they are. Thus far, we've published one paper looking at the biodiversity based on what we know, and we see an interesting trend. Unlike the asphaltic fossils in La Brea Tapit Museum, LA, and the ones that in Cuba and the ones that in Venezuela and other parts of South America, they have an interested assemblage where they have a herbivore present that was trapped in the asphalt, and then a predator came and fed on it, and then another predator came and fed on it. So they have a chain reaction of different animals being trapped in the fossils, but it was all either predator heavy or carnivore heavy, I should say, because some animals would come and just feed on the carrion, the dead organisms that's there. But in Trinidad, it's different. We haven't found a single carnivore as yet. So in Trinidad, we don't know what actually big carnivores we had roaming Trinidad and Tobago before. So far, we know there's been the giant ground sloth, which was, and when I say giant ground sloth, this would be in the vicinity of 3 to 5 meters tall, one animal being 3 to 5 meters tall. We have the glyptodon, which is a giant armadillo, and it would look similar to our local tattoo 9-banded armadillo, but it would be the size of a Tida, right? A Nissan Tida. Okay, so this is the type of megafauna we had roaming, but we haven't found any of our carnivores as yet. So we're not saying they're not there, but this is just one of the reasons we know we need to investigate further, and we need to resume the dig and go back.
That is absolutely fascinating, and I don't know how many people in Trinidad and Tobago actually are aware of this. So what caused these animals to shrink? I know that's a general evolution question, really,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's so remarkable to believe that it was all happening here in Trinidad too.
Well, yeah, you're right. It is evolution. It's these animals, they adapted to what resources were available. Larger fauna historically have been made extinct, with the exception of what's in Africa. We have no more megafauna on the planet of that magnitude. In South America, the largest fauna, mammalian fauna, you'll probably find is like a tapir, capybaras, or some of the large cats. But other than that, in North and South America, we have no more large mammals anymore, and that's a driver based on both changes in the biodiversity, changes in habitat and environment on the planet, but also as a factor of human intervention, hunting. Yeah, when civilizations, some of these animals did overlap with human populations up to about 10,000 years ago in South America. So these animals, they would have been in Trinidad in the vicinity of 10 to 20,000 years ago. But the oldest human remains we have in Trinidad being the Banoari remains, which resides at the UAE Zoology Museum as well, has been dated in the vicinity of 5 to 6,000 years. So these animals were there even before human settlement, but human settlement would have been one of the drivers to send these organisms extinct.
And what's remarkable about this story is it's a little bit of a butterfly effect. It's a little bit of serendipity. You meet someone, a conversation strikes up, and look at where we end up. So, at which period did they take the fossils from Trinidad to?
So the people at LA, they took no fossils. It's very interesting. Fossil research or fossil exploration in Trinidad is closely linked to our oil exploration back in the 1920s. Okay, so when they found that one of the large Glyptodon scutes the shell, I believe that would have been in the 1920s when we had the Apex Oil Company. They found it when they were doing site prep to put down some of the first oil rigs. And the geologists back in the day, some of them would have been familiar with what it would be, but these specimens, they left Trinidad as early as 1920s. The ones we have, they left, I would say, in the 1980s, thereabout. Florida University, I think it's Florida University, they have a large collection of Trinidad material from the forest reserve area. A lot of it is would be fossilized insect remains. But apart from Trinidad, they have the other largest collection of Trinidad asphaltic fossilized remains from the Ice Age era. And we've been in discussions with them as well. So at least we know what material is there. One of the research projects, Dr. Mikhailo and myself, we are investigating is producing an entire checklist of all, documenting all fossilized material, asphaltic fossilized material that exists for Trinidad and Tobago globally. So we are looking at all the databases and compiling one research paper.
Ryan, this is really, I think, fantastic work for our region. And it's things that we didn't even think there's anyone working in the field.
So currently, there are no active fossil excavations I know of happening in Trinidad. But there's land preparation for different types of activities through the work of the National Trust. Very often we hear of persons doing land prep for either construction or agriculture, and they find bones or they find remains. And lots of these are just of archaeological importance, but not paleontological importance. But the National Trust has an interest in that as well, and I am affiliated with the National Trust. So, but in terms of paleontological material, we are in discussions with the Heritage Petroleum Oil Company because a lot of the fossil sites are on their grounds. So we are putting things in place to hopefully in 2026 to resume the dig and take it from there.
Along the same line with the paleontology and fossils and so on, you briefly mentioned the Banoari burial. Tell us more about it. I would often take my history of science class for a trip to the museum. And those of you listening in, just contact the university if you want to make a visit to the museum. And a lot of my students were completely unaware of what a national treasure that is. So tell us about the Banoari burial and its importance.
It is by no means just a specimen or a sample. At the end of the day, this is actually something quite sacred because it is human remains of an indigenous group for Trinidad. So we want to ensure that type of sanctity and respect is always given to the remains. And this is again something that the National Trust we advocate for. This is why we don't promote even taking photos of it and publishing it online, because at the end of the day, this is still it would have been someone's ancestors. Okay. But on the flip side of the same coin, we have the academic and scientific importance of the site, okay, and of the remains. So the National Trust, I would say, we are a bit, um, I say the word conflicted, but I use it delicately, conflicted in how we treat with the Banoari remains, because we have close ties with the various indigenous groups in Trinidad, and the indigenous groups, they are of the belief the remains should be interned at the Banoari site in South Trinidad. The Banoari site in South Trinidad is a vested property under the National Trust. So no one could actually do work there. It is a property protected by the National Trust and managed by the National Trust. The actual remains, we have had several scientists expressing an interest in doing research on the actual remains. We want to make sure there is agreement, there is an understanding between the various First Peoples groups, the National Trust, as well as the academic fraternities, to ensure that the sanctity of what we do is maintained. And having said that, the importance of that site, it goes to show how land was used in previous times. Okay, that area was inundated area that was surrounded by marshland. We know it. We know of this because of the shell remains and other remains we find at the burial site. We know of the other types of artifacts present at the site, and this is very important to us because it also lets us know, one, what species was available as resources to our human settlements, but also how the human settlements in these areas in the past, what relationship they had with the landscape, both the built landscape, what they constructed, the natural landscape, what they found, but also how they modified lands for their own needs, where they put their structures, where they put their traditional farmlands, where they gathered things like snails, etc., and fish for food sources. So this is why it is very important. It is very important for us to pay attention, both from an environmental, archaeological, paleontological, biological scale, how land and resources was used and was available from 20,000 years ago plus to now. There is a story to be told there, and there's also lessons to be learned by all of this. And it's what is we need to pay attention. And that's why I like gathering information from all of these different areas, these different epochs, but also utilizing that in hope that we could use it to influence policy development for management of resources.
Oh my God, I could talk to you forever. So this is really fascinating. And this is just some of the work you've done. But I'm going to ask you just a few more as we start to tie up now. Questions a little bit. Let's get to know Ryan a little bit better, right? And the questions we often ask all of our guests. So what's one of the most interesting experience you've had? And it could be related to the work that you do, or maybe something we don't know about Ryan, a hobby, anything.
I remember the first time I snorkeled in Tobago. That would have been in the early 2000s. So seeing the coral reef for the first time, and being among fishes, because you always see fishes darting away from you, but when you snorkel on the reef, the fish is there, you're with the fishes. So that was amazing, but also sad in the sense that I've been visiting the same coral reef since 2006 in Charlottesville, and that's 20 years. Every year seeing the same reef. So I've been seeing the degradation of the reef since. But that first time, yeah, I still remember seeing that my first barracuda and my first stingray all in the first 10 minutes snorkeling. Okay, that was amazing. Um, Other than that, I think something that most people don't know about me. I would say, um, I think most people don't know that I am an amateur DJ.
Okay, that's one we couldn't
Yeah,
have guessed. Should have
yeah,
asked something we couldn't guess about you. But then
yeah.
the headphones, Now I'm seeing you in a different
I,
perspective.
yeah, I actually do hate wearing headphones. That's why I think I never went from amateur to professional.
Okay, so next time I want to have a little party, right? So apart from a talk, I want by from a professional. I know who to call. But that is really fascinating. But all of it has converged to, I think, bringing you exactly where you are and what you do with the environment and all the amazing things in the world. So I'm going to ask you one last question, which is our signature question on the wormhole. And this should be of quite relevant to you. If you could be any animal you wanted to be, what would you choose?
I am torn between three species. One, a blue whale. Two, the Greenland shark. And three, a Galapagos tortoise. And all three are long-lived animals. Um, but all three are animals of great conservation importance. Um, but the whale, because the whale circumnavigates the planet, it's the largest animal on the planet to date, historically and at present, and circumnavigates. And I like to travel, so that's why. The Greenland shark, because it's one of the longest lived animals, vertebrates on the planet, right? A Greenland shark could live up to 400 years old. Okay, but it's at risk of being overfished and overhunted in these regions. So that's not so great. And the other one's Galapagos tortoise, because again, could be long-lived, but lives in a protected area on the Galapagos Islands. So it has some degree of protection. So maybe if I was that, if I reincarnated, one of these.
Okay, I must say, I mean, with all the different guests I have had, I think that's the first time I've got a choice of those three. All right, so with this, Ryan, let me thank you so much for taking time from your day to spend a few minutes to talk to us, to enlighten us and teach us so much about we didn't even get it so much into the flora, but the fauna of Trinidad and Tobago and some of the very, very important issues to us. So thank you for joining us on the Wormhole.
Pleased to be here.
Okay, and folks, that brings us to the end of this episode. I am Sharon Hack from Studio 42 signing off for this episode of The Wormhole till we see you next time. Bye.